You humble me for such an invitation, and I have to give you credit. Your ability to to speak is very commendable. And really, that's what I am trying to do in everything. I'm trying to empower people and giving them a basic confidence to speak the language. And I firmly believe that sometimes, actually many times, second language speakers and young people can probably make the biggest difference, the largest impact to the Indigenous language revitalization. Self-location is what I'm going to be talking about today as to where I come from. And as you had mentioned, I'm currently I'm studying, reading, studying, and I'm going to school. And I'm currently at Victoria, in Victoria, BC. It's currently 10:04 in the morning, and it stopped raining. The sun is shining, or if you want to go real thick accent there, the sun is shining, and it's Miogisigaw, Midogisigaw, Minogisigaw. And those are the three dialects that I really try to, I'm very confident in sharing those dialects. Back to a little bit of that self-location. Up until I was 18 years old, I never really had a desire to go anywhere outside of my reserve. My dad always said, finish grade 12, because he never finished grade 12, and he knew it was a struggle. And he said, finish grade 12, and the plan for my life was to help my dad, Nuktawi, or locally we say Nipapa. And it was always to help him with dog mushing, wanihi, trapping, commercial net fishing or net fishing. We have a local gas station back home, and my dad's been running that operation for almost 30 years, and he's just a hard worker. Like, he finished grade 6, never went back to school. And from one of his trapping paychecks back in the early 80s, that's what he did to make a living. He just trapped. Grade 6 education. So somebody gave him an idea from out of town. He says, geez, the only gas station in town is run by Omistagoso or a Moniao, a white person, and nobody really had a real desire to do anything. And said, you should open a store, somebody told him. And here we are, 30 years later. He's still doing a very good job. And that taught me a lesson very early on. The same work ethic that he learned from fishing, trapping, hunting, dog mushing, he applied that same work ethic into a modern day context to be able to provide a living for my whole family. So I learned that very early on, that the work ethic of our people, despite having no formal education, is probably the biggest factor of what allows, or what can allow us to be a success. Is what we make of it. Life is what we make of it, and that's really what I wanted to talk about today. And I'll share my PowerPoint, and I just want to confirm. Do I speak for 1 hour? Oh. Okay. First of all, take a real good look at my face. I don't know if it's frozen, but I'm going to use this picture. There's a couple different ways you can say picture, and the word that I'll share is how I grew up. Chagastipsun. Chagastipsun is it literally means your self-reflection. And down south in the Plains Cree wide dialect, a common term is masinpiwin. But of course, traditionally, our people, they used both terms. And that's another lesson that I learned very early on. Just because one way, there's one way to say things, that doesn't mean that's the only way. And if you can kind of get your head around that, that will speed up your ability to learn. And if you can kind of figure out that we have more in common amongst the dialects of Cree, and also we have so much in common with our older sister language, Anishinaabe. And if you can listen to the patterns, the root words, you can definitely start to understand so much more, and it's very rewarding. And that's what I do is I that's what I do is I exchange one word at a time. Kimberly, she, Kimberly teaches in a school building, and she knows half of the struggle in that school is managing a classroom. It's a tough job, and people need to understand that the first job of Ogiskinamagu, a teacher, is to help kids fall in love with learning. And a Cree teacher is actually even more challenging because you are implanting a foreign system on to teach in a very unnatural way. So I'll talk a little bit about that. What I mean is, we have this concept already. Every single person that goes to a K-12 system, that reading, writing, English, math will help you get a job. That's, you do good, you go to university. And then people have a hard time figuring out, well, if I take Cree, I don't have to take it. It's not going to help me get a job if I don't want to. So there's a little bit of a back burner already. And then the kids are often forced to take it, not forced because you have to, forced because it's there. It's a real good idea where, it's about reconciliation. It looks good to parents, but at the same time, we often struggle to figure out, at the end of the day, what is it that we have to try and do? So when I was teaching Cree, and what Kimberly is often struggling with is, you have a group of 20, 25 kids if you're lucky. If the normal classroom size on our First Nation, especially for the first month of September, is definitely over 25. Awasamis, Nistano Nyanosap meaning 25. Awasamis means more than. You kind of have, you're managing people. Some people want to absolutely be there. Some people are quiet. They don't really say anything, but they want to learn. And a lot more of the people come in there and say, I have to take this class because I don't have any other class to take it. So that's actually more common. And it hasn't been until recently that people have, Aisinoak, people, that's a dialect neutral way to say people, have really started to say, It's a sexy thing, speaking the language. And it's an attractive thing. More people are wanting to learn. And I credit that to a lot of people that have struggled to do the same thing for a long time. But pop culture kind of played. Idle No More came around, and that, people all of a sudden wearing ribbon skirts, and Truth and Reconciliation, Missing and Murdered Aboriginal Women, all these came to like a civil rights movement was upon us back in 2010, 2011, 2012. 2013 is started to kind of pick up some steam. And then, of course, in 2019, the international language of Indigenous languages, and that kept the momentum going. And now here we are. So, what happened was, of course, the pandemic came, and here I am teaching Cree on Facebook with my, I think I had, before the pandemic, I think I had 10,000. After the pandemic, doubled over. And I started that in 2015 on Facebook, social media. And I never changed the recipe and the formula to what I do. It's one word at a time, making Nihiawiwin, Nihidawiwin, Ininimuin, Ninuiwin, not intimidating, attractive. The sexy language that I've always known it to be. I teach everything. As a teacher on First Nations, and I know that mental health, suicide, ideation is, social issues, addictions, intergenerational trauma, hopelessness. That's rampant. So you have a young brown Cree speaking guy coming in and making it fun and attractive. As a teacher inside a classroom, it picks up steam, and then I basically did the same thing on social media. But the thing of it is, I am nobody special. This person, this confidence to be able to teach and speak, every single one of us had that one time. That's the saddest thing is, I was nobody special in the 80s. I was just like everybody else that spoke the language in my community. More and more people lost the language. And then the other unique thing about social media, Facebook group there is, and I've been bullied. That's on the reserve. That wasn't in a residential school. That wasn't a big city. That wasn't, another race. It was our own people that bullied me, my peers. And I'm very protective online. And I didn't know this, but I was essentially creating a classroom, but with people that wanted to be there. That's the difference. I would have already surpassed 23,000. I've deleted and blocked quite a bit of people. And numbers are not, they're nice. That's pretty cool. But at the same time, I definitely not did it for the numbers. I want to continue that path of teaching those that want to learn, because there's so many of our people. Tired of looking at that face. There you go, the older revised version, the seasoned picture. And so what happened was, many of our families, many of our people, they've been displaced, urbanized, adopted out, 60 scoop, no employment on a First Nation, traumatized. I've known people that have, physically being assaulted, and nothing happened on the reserve, and they just left. So either by choice or being forced out, they ended up in a place where they had nobody to speak the language to, or All the family members lost their their language. And I thought about this. I didn't know this, but I thought about it, and I said, you know, when I was growing up, I learned the language from Kihtea, from elders. I learned the language from Niwago Maganak, my relatives. And I learned the language from Nichiwaganak, my friends. I learned the language from Nichiwamak, my male cousins, my female cousins. And, you know, I learned all the swear words by the time I was 10, and Nimama didn't teach me, Nipapa didn't teach me, Nogum didn't teach me, Nimosum didn't teach me. So, when I was humming along Facebook, somebody messaged me and says, I don't have anybody else. I'm a 60 scoop survivor. And that story kind of popped in once in a while, and I thought, I'm just going to answer anybody's question because they might not have anybody else. So I've kind of self-appointed myself as a surrogate Cree teacher. But the problem is I have to try and be everything to everybody. I have no problem doing that, but naturally, Cree speakers had all kinds of different teachers. Women had women to teach them about certain things, and men had certain things to teach them about certain things. So that's the problem with any school in any language. The teacher has to be the expert. And so that includes, that's a lot of pressure on somebody that's teaching the language. But it's coming along. And so just thought I'd mention that. You stop me anytime you want, Charissa. I love talking, especially about the language.
How?
Look what you went and did. You just said, talk about whatever. Yeah, he's got. Back to my younger face, sunburnt. Oh, geez. Otigotian. This is where I'm from over here. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse. Go up, Mom. Okay. You see this? This is my school when I was growing up. This opened back in 1995, I believe it is. And see this? This is no longer here. This is the local arena. And this is the road that they built. This is the only road that goes anywhere in the world. Okay, this is all an island. And this is what you call the Big Island. Nobody really calls it that. It's just, this is South End. And South End got its name because it's on the south end of Ranger Lake. Now, this body of water is called Wapao. Wapao means narrows. And and the Cree word is, you can see wapao in the first part of this word, wapa teguchoanok. And that means there's another word in here. Half of this other root word is ipimichoak. It means there's a current, there's a water that's flowing. So this here is wapa teguchoanok. There used to be people that lived on this side and this side. Very, very few people. There must have been maybe at any one given time, maybe 50 people, because this is just a meeting place. If you travel north, this is you're looking at south. If you travel south, that takes you to the Churchill River, Reindeer River, Churchill River, and that eventually takes you to Cumberland House. And if you go behind us here, that takes you to the north, Reindeer Lake. And this was a common stopping area for my people. So anyways, this road was finished in 1978, year I was born. you're doing the math. Yes, it's about 42, 43. My birthday's coming up, FYI. And so I figured that they finished building that road because they knew I was going to be born. I'm just lying. Anyways, this is where I grew up. You see right by the arena right there, there's a kind of a house. That's my home. That's where I was. That's where I grew up. Iguta, there. Iguta. Kagi piupigian is past tense. Kagi means something that I did before. Kagi piupigian. That's where I, past tense grew up. Of course, Eagle's View here. This is Reindeer Lake. You see south end of that Reindeer Lake. That's where I grew up. And then it goes into Manitoba. All right, that's how this works. And a lot of our people have relatives in Brochet, Manitoba, Thompson, Manitoba. My great-grandmother came from South Indian Lake, Pipunapiwinik. Of course, South Indian, we have relatives in Norway House, Cross Lake. I'm not sure if my cursor is, where it's supposed to be. Maybe it's, maybe Cross Lake is somewhere over here. I can figure that out. Mutapam, I think. All right. I've been to Grand Rapids, Mr. Pawistagook, or Pawistagook, Grand Rapids. In the 80s, what my dad did was he would take us from South End, he'd go to Prince Albert, and we'd have dog races, and then we'd go to Pelican Arrows, we'd go to Grand Rapids, we'd go to Cross Lake, we go to Norway House, and we would even end up back in Brochet in the 80s. And that's, as a 10, 11-year-old, I would listen to my dad visiting with all the fluent speakers, and I quickly picked up that the N dialect was not very different from the TH dialect. The older people, all of them understood each other. And what happened, and I'm going to stop this because this is just, it's so fascinating for me anyways. I hope it is for you. Kista, I hope Kista find it fascinating. It was, a long time ago, our people were not locked up on reservations. Shit, it was a real Kiam life, If you didn't like your neighbor, you just moved out and you lived in the trap line with your extended family. And, but real kind of like, if you don't like that person, you just got to be courteous, always respectful, because you don't know when you're going to need them down the road. Like I broke down, my canoe smashed in the rocks, I'm on a shoreline, that person, there was always that insurance, that respect. And that's what my dad actually taught me is you always treat people like you're going to need them one day on the land. There's always a mutual, even if you just absolutely hate that person. But you know what? That's something that I think we forget that's real patience. And that's a lot of our young people don't like that, I think that's definitely a cultural difference. You can probably write a PhD dissertation on that cultural custom of, almost like letting bygones be bygones, and then you're introduced with this whole new foreign justice system, action now. There's a real clash there, and so a real, real kind of easygoing, patient, let things be. Generation after generation, it'll just work itself out. And then another thing just kind of come in there and say, no, we want action now. We want the RCMP. We want roads. We want the government housing. We want electricity. We want running water. We want welfare. We want K-12 education. And then this one just kind of got weeded out. The old people they stopped sharing what they had to know. And I was talking to my dad this morning, and he said, he's writing all his thoughts down on paper, and he said, I remember when we first had a store, a northern store, white people came to work there. I remember when they first had a school, white people were all the teachers. I remember when we first had a maskiwigamik, kind of like a clinic, small, clinic, or like a hospital type of clinic. White people worked there. And he said, our mindset was still in the bush. And we never worried about truck payments, skidoo payments. We never worried about our houses being broken into, because the government houses that they supplied were cheap anyway, and everything just had basics anyway. And our homes were out in the lake. Nobody was really interested in working these jobs. Anyways, it wasn't until, trapping went down, fishing went down, people started getting jobs, life changed. Anyways, you stop me if you want to have any questions. Like I said, I love to talk, especially about this stuff right now. J-Squad, hold on.
While you're looking for that, Simon, you really brought me back to home where I see the land of your hometown. Where I come from is called Rossville, Gestapenanik, and Norrie House, right? And growing up in my backyard was trees, rocks, the lake, the river, and I lived. That was my living. It's my backyard. But now it's like trees are cut down, the water's being polluted. You can't even swim in the backyard anymore. And it's like, I can even take my kids to go swim. Now we have to go further away just to go swim in clean water, or they make man-made beaches. Like it's changed a lot, like the land, the hunting, the water, and it just really hit me home when you brought all that up.
From where again?
Ginasal CP, Norrie House.
All right. Did you say Gestapenanik?
That's what it was called, Rossville. Yeah, that's what they called it, Gestapenanik.
You know what that means? It just means permanent settlement. That's all it means.
Yeah, because that one part of the trading, like where Hudson, not Hudson Bay. There was a trading post anyways. There was 2 trading posts and where they arrived, Gestapenanik, and then on the other side was Plain Green Lake where the Hudson Bay was. Yeah.
So one of the things is Prince Albert today, that really caught my ear when you said Gestapenanik, because Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, that's the name of it, Gestapenanik. And, that tells us that just because the fur trading post moved there didn't make it Gestapenanik. They moved there because of strategic purposes. The fur trading posts moved to established, traveled common areas where people either settled permanently or gathered seasonally in large numbers. So very, very important. I'm still learning myself, and the best thing that you can do is just have this kind of back and forth conversation. I'll always try to learn as much as possible. And now, going back to why I'm sharing these pictures is we're called a Siniskainoa. It just means people of the rocks. But because, we live in the Precambrian Shield there, and you can't really, there's no farming anywhere. And so you can see this Reindeer Lake way on the top right corner. It's all covered by solid rock. So Ontario, northern Manitoba, we're all the same. Lots of lakes, lots of rivers, lots of rocks. And so that's what the people from Cumberland House called us, to distinguish the other Crees. people of the rocks. Cree, because you say it in the Cree language, it's northern people of the Rocky Cree. And this is Nistao, my brother-in-law. This is Nuhutawi, my dad. And this is just on his trap line, they killed Biu, a bull moose. And our people were first employed by modern day economy as laborers in the fur trade. And this is kind of a typical picture of a York boat traveling through rapids. Not sure who drew it or whatever, but I thought it was a good description of traditional economy, traditional in a sense of modern day. All right, we got half an hour. I can do this. J-Squad, hold on to your Zoom. All right, what you see is an analogy. I really have to hit this home. I was asked, what's so special and how do you teach Y, TH, and N dialect? And I'm learning Anishinaabe, and I'm learning the L dialect. Think of what I said, life before sedentary life before reservations. Think of, just close your eyes. Don't look what I'm doing right there. Just close your eyes. Imagine a water flowing naturally, unblocked. All right. That's, people traveled through that water back and forth. That water acted as a way to connect with people, and a source of life, water, sustenance, all that good stuff. Now open your eyes. I bet you some of you didn't even close your eyes, Mama's cats. And the Cree word for close your eyes is pasaguape. Pasaguape. Close your eyes. Pasaguape. Anyways, our language, the strength of our language really was the natural flow of a river. Our people, your ability to move up the stream and down the stream really appreciated a tolerance. And people didn't say that's wrong. Your way is wrong. The way you say that word is wrong. We've never said that. We never did that to each other. It was just different. And you meet so many people down the road that if you meet 10 people and 8 of them say it in one particular way and 2 of them say it a little different, then that's just a different way of saying it. And if you meet 100 people and one of them says it in a real different way, that same word, then you don't tell that person they're wrong. You just talk about them after they're gone and say, man, that guy's a fool. He didn't even know what he's talking about. Yes, gossip happened back then. Anyways, now imagine the natural order of things, the water flowing in from one direction to another, that filters out so many things naturally. And unfortunately, what happens as well is when you stop the water, that's going to be where all the problems are. When people were forced on reservations, it made the water sedentary. It made the water stale. And what happens is you start to become your whole mentality starts to shift, and I have some pests, sagamisak, I have some bugs because that's where they grow, and a lot of them carry disease. Not so much in northern Saskatchewan or Manitoba or Ontario, but there's different parts of the world where you get enough of these guys, they will start spreading bad stuff. And our mentalities as Indigenous people started to be formed by aggressive colonization. And then if you've ever been to a hockey game, or if you've ever gone to some of our communities, we still do that today. So, oh, they speak the Y dialect over there. They don't know what they're talking about. Oh, their TH dialect. Oh, they talk too fast. They don't know what they're talking about. Oh, Northern Ontario, the L dialect. Oh, those guys have been Christianized so much, they don't even know what they're talking about. You know, we start to pick on each other, yet traditionally, our elders they were always revered and highly respected different ways and tolerated. And a lot of it was because we moved from place to place. And we were a lot. We connected with people at such a deeper level. The communication was bar none. I think I'm using that term right. You know, even though we text today, even though we email, we can pick up the phone, we can do Zoom or visit virtually, our people's ability to connect back then was so much deeper. You know, you go visit for a month, you know, you go visit for 2 weeks, you go stay with family when they're going to have a baby, you go stay with them for a year, you go stay with them for 2 years. You know, those relationships, they form deep roots. And everybody always understood, always knew, news traveled fast. That's the moccasin telegraph I'm talking about. That's a real thing. You know, people knew when somebody passed away, all of a sudden there's a funeral and people from all over the place would come in for that funeral. There was no phones. So that's what I mean. You know, people were so connected before anything, colonization. You know, that's what happened when you stop the river and when you form these pockets of people, the people, instead of, you know, looking forward, looking outward, looking at the connection, they start looking inward. They start looking at each other and they start pointing fingers. They're different. We're better. I've seen that. You know, that's really why I just started Cree Simon Says that I mentioned, and the majority of the stuff that I have is just fun stuff. You know, if some of this speaks to you, good, and none of it speaks to you, it's okay. But I bet you some of it will. Astam, come. Giam means I don't care, let it be. It can be a negative thing, it can be a positive thing. You know, it's not in my control. Just give it up to the higher power. Bito de, come. It means walk over. You know, walk over. Come over here by walking. Awas, get away. Ma de. That means, would you please? That means, that's what that is. You know, you don't say, you know, like, please pass the salt. We say, hey, mate pita mo, mate pita. It's all in the tone of your voice, that word especially. Mate pita suitan. You can also say it in a very rude way and say it in the same way. Mate pita suitan. Like, oh shit, what the hell's wrong with you? You know, that's all in the tone of your voice. Egua or egua. Go. Egua, go, let's go. And of course, Jesqua, wait, Jesqua, or Chisqua. Northern people from my area, we don't really say che, like Jesqua. We always go with the E, Chisqua. You can't talk as fancy, it's cold and we gotta go. Hey, just kidding. Somebody said that to me once. And so I continue to try and open up a whole new world to people with one word. The word bigo, bigo. That means ash, you know? The black stuff after the fire is out. You know, everybody knows what ash is. So that's one of the terms for coffee is bigo tiwapoy. It means ash drink. Bigo tiwapoy. Now somebody is going to come along and tell you, oh, that Simon doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, if I could talk to them and if they had a little bit of an open mind, maybe I could just explain this and maybe I could listen to them and say, Bigo tiwapoy is burping. And that comes from the percolator that, used to plug in, and he used to make all this, like somebody was somebody like burping. I said, well, okay, that's another way. I'm not going to sit there and argue with you. And if that's what you want to share, that's good. But this is one way. And of course, I do know that pigosis, black fly, comes from that word pigo. Because sometimes when you're out there in an open fire, some of the little ashes, they float way up in the sky, just like a little bug, a black fly. Okay, I got somebody on the chat here. We can stop at 10:50. Time for questions. All right, that gives us 7 minutes. Thank you, Sharissa. Oh, that was supposed to be a private message. Happy face. I went and opened up your secret there for messaging me. I'm sorry. Yeah. So one of the other things, especially when I'm around kids, I talk about, again, the etymology of our language. Esquesis doesn't mean girl. Esquesis, that has more power than just girl. If you think about this, I'm going to stop this and we'll get back to it. If you think about it, if you say woman in English and girl, they don't sound the same. It's disconnected. It's compartmentalized. Same thing with men, boy. Okay, we have more in common with the Latin English, the old Shakespearean way of talking. It is you I love. If you break down the word kisagihitin, that's exactly what it means. Literally means it is you I love. Kisagihitin. But because people translate it to I love you, and then they explain that, oh, niya means me, kia means you, nida means me, kida means you. Okay? Nimuguman means my knife. Kimuguman means your knife. Nipapa means my dad. Kipapa means your dad. Okay, but you just said, I love you. Shouldn't say nisagitin. And then that's when the language starts to be really clumsy, because not everybody is figuring out, why is kisagitin I love you? And shouldn't it be nisagitin? Because we've lost that ability to really understand what it is that we're saying. We're trying to compare a modern day business compartmentalized language that grew from a very, very similar roots, Latin, Old English. We have more in common with that language. And you can't think of it as, oh, that's just back then, that's just backwards. No. That the language was to really guide you to the nearest place in humanity. All right. We don't have any word for goodbye. I bet you knew that, right? All right. Do you know what goodbye comes from? Sarissa?
You mean giga wafamitin?
And that means I will see you. Yeah. But in English, goodbye, that means God be with you. In Old English, God be with ye. Think of Shakespeare and all the old kings and queens. We have more in common with how they said it, because they were still, they're still in that Kiam way of life. They still had, we'll eat deer tonight. Well, we'll eat fish tonight. They were still back then, but now everything just kind of like the rat race really started to pick up, and goodbye. They wanted to do away with being the spiritual stuff, and wanted to compartmentalize everything. That's why there is no word for the term goodbye, but we do have farewell terms that are comparative to those old original terms. Manitoba kitapa, may the Creator look after you. And then we also say muistas, later. Kigawa pamitin, is another term. And then another term from Moose Lake, Manitoba is Gigawap Megawisin. May you be seen, indicating, it's like a blessing. It's like a hopeful blessing that we meet and we cross our paths again. That's deep stuff when you start picking, when you start unpacking our Indigenous languages. And now going back to the word esquesis. This can also be napesis. But esquesis at one time was a reminder. That very word reminded us that the girls were not only girls, they were women to be. And that reminded women that they should conduct themselves in a certain way. And this is the exact same thing for napeo and napesis, man and boy. And even boy looking at girl, they seen them, like the word reminds you that I am looking at a woman to be, a woman that will become like my mother, a woman that will become like my auntie, a woman that will become like my grandmother, like my great-grandmother. That relationship, that very word reminds us of how we are supposed to conduct ourselves in our relationships with other people, and how we should be reminding ourselves to conduct ourselves. I was thinking about this, and I'm considering doing my dissertation on this whole subject of word etymology. If you think about it this way, all of our children were given the constitution of how we governed ourselves, and the constitution was within the very words that we used on a daily basis. When you think about those words, when you take time to just marinate in the meaning of some of those words, you start to understand, okay, there's certain ways that I should be acknowledging and expressing my feelings to people, and why that's important. And then, like, the last word that I'll share, I had more slides, but this is a good time to pause it for now, is the word for in-laws is the ones that I should not offend, the ones that I am careful how I speak to. And there's this story of this son-in-law running and bursting into the house of his mother-in-law's house, and the mother-in-law is sitting there. He runs around all over the house and looks for anybody to talk to, because he shouldn't be talking, and he couldn't talk to his mother-in-law. Nobody's around, and his wife is down the road, and she's giving birth, and she's in labor, and there's a cat right there. He starts talking to the cat, and the mother-in-law starts talking to the cat. They both talk to the cat, and the mother-in-law says, okay, I'm getting ready. I'm going to go help you. That's a true story, because that's based on our relationships of how we are to conduct ourselves with certain people in society. Any questions?
There. Oh, lots. I'm glad you're a talker, because I could listen to you talk Ginwes for a long time. So I'm sure we have lots of questions. I have lots of questions, but I know that Noah had a really interesting one that I wanted to know too.
Well, yeah, I've got a lot of questions too. So, well, Kim and ask them within Simon. That was so awesome. Like, and I was just wondering, because you're learning about so many of the variations in an Inuit, and I was wondering if, because every now and then I hear a word with an L or an R. Here in Manitoba, for a frog, there's a rikis, I've heard, and then for a squirrel, I've heard a liquichas. And I was just wondering if, in all the speakers that you've heard, is there any stories that have to do with the L's and R's that you've heard?
That's comes from James Bay area, the L dialect, and they do say aliguachas. They say nila, kila. That means, nina, me, kina, you. So that's easy stuff. That's L. We have an L dialect, but they're very the influence has always been there. and then it disappeared for a while, then came back. So the people from now what we now call Winnipeg, they've always knew relatives from the L dialect through the York factory and the Churchill River system. And then the R dialect is on the other side of James Bay towards Quebec. And that's, Naskapi, we call them today. Those are relatives of Cree people, and Innu, Innu. Innu is basically Innu, means the human beings. We say Idinu for TH dialect speakers and Inu for Y dialect speakers. And the Innu, they're the Far East N dialect / Anishinaabe speakers. I say Anishinaabe because the language influence.
Excellent.
Oh.
I wanted to know that one too. I always wondered about those. Kim, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to what Simon says, where he had to break up the words for the speaker and the learners to understand. So I'm in the middle of doing the months, and it's a lot of work, and they get it now. So we're doing the date, like November in our region, we say Aquatinoe Bisum. So you have your peace word. Aquatin means freeze. So November in our region, we look at everything is starting to freeze. What's starting to freeze? The trees, the ground, the water, the land, right? So your key word is aquatin, freeze.
Aquatin, yeah, it's freezing.
Yeah. So aquatinoe bisum, we call it freezing up moon.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's not a question.
Yeah. Well, but I always thought it had to do with the animals too, but it's the land. So when you look at the circle of all the 12 months, the land changes, the animals changes. I'm like, wow, there's just like so much. I wish I could have like just the one thing. Like there's so much that we could. There's another way of saying November, isn't there?
Yeah, there's on this chart right here, November is Kaskatnaupisim. No, the Vigopiwipisim. That means when you see all the white dusting, all the trees are frozen, and they have all the like this frosting. That's the frost up moon right there. So, but this is exactly what you're talking about. Now, I wanted to say, if that's the way you want to teach based on your area, then you absolutely should. That's called indigenizing curriculum. And the danger of trying to have a one system 12 months calendar. First of all, there are 13 months. We're already missing the mark there. So we're already compromising on the 12 moons. The other thing is, in my territory and your territory, Migisui Pisim comes at a later time than our southern resource developing relatives. The Y dialect speakers were the first ones out the gate to develop a lot of the materials that we see today. Under the assumption of time's ticking, elders are dying, we need to capture the language. So they would call the month of February Migisuripisim. And then, of course, that confused northern speakers as we started to take over those jobs as Cree teachers in the late 80s. We would go where the stuff were developed, not realizing that the elders were a little confused themselves. Like, why are we calling Eagle Moon February when the eagle comes a month later? And so it's a learning process. And I always say, make room, be open-minded, and just express that it's one way. But what you're doing by saying this is what we say here, That's a qualifier. You're qualifying it, and you're letting people know that this is one way. So awesome job.
I can say. And before I ask my last question and close the live, Donis, did you have a question?
Not a question, just a comment. I just love the insight into how the language establishes good relations, and that it's all about relationships with us, and to have that enforced and reinforced over and over again, it creates this good life, or this space for good life. Like, you know, that's what we're focusing on now, is to teach the language through the language, not necessarily through translation. So neen, geen, ween, and then when you get into the longer words, you know, we always put you before me. Like the language of me is at the end, which is good for us to be thinking about each other, and then to be including ourselves, you know, and thinking about each other and then including ourselves, and then having fun talking about other people. Which is like our base form. But I just love, I don't know, I just love that. And I love the connection and the thought about the way that our ancestors lived and what we want to connect to. And we have the same thing in Anishinaabe, and like our great grandparents and our great grandchild is the same word. And it tells us what is the purpose of life. This is the purpose of life. That's it. And we
What
say
is-
it all the time. And making that link between our great grandparents and our great grandchild. That's what we do in our life.
In Cree, we said Nitago Pichigan.
Mm-hmm.
Same word, huh?
Uh-huh.
And in Cree, we say no taban, the one I pull along. Because if you ever go to a camp of families living out in the land, no electricity, no power, no cell phone service. There's older people there, there's younger people there, there's parents, there's babies. You'll notice that the oldest elders are always pulling along those that can barely walk, because they match their speed. And I've watched it with my own eyes. And I often tell our young people, say, you might be thinking that the Cree people just ran out of words and it's confusing because great grandparents and great grandchildren have the same word. No, it's the relationship that they had one time. You try taking a 2-year-old over to Walmart and they're going to pull you along, and they're gonna go tapeg, and then, you know, at certain times the elder pulls on along. So that's the relationship, the way I've explained it. And I really like the word that you used, link, and that's definitely it.
That's what my cuckoo said, is like, you have a responsibility to your grandchildren to live as long as you can, because you enrich their lives every day that you spend with them.
That way.
Mm-hmm. Miigwech.
I would say, before I ask my last question, I just wanted to read you some of the comments from online. There's so many, lots of love. One from Namama too. She says, Kinanaskomithin really touched my heart. One from Carrie, love hearing about my Cree language. Reminds me how beautiful it is to hear fluent speakers speak. Lots of thank yous, lots of Kinanaskomitins and miigweches too. And I want to say Kinanaskomithin too, Nista. So I have one last question. As a learner, do you have any advice for learners who are learning their language?
First of all, thank you for reminding me I'm on Facebook. Now I'm real shy. I'll tell your mom I said hello. I greet her. I would say that's such a big question. That's a very important question, but you can come at it in so many different levels. First of all, I have to explain that generally, if there is absolutely a community about to lose all their language, pick a place and let that be the last stand, the very no compromise, whatever that is. And oftentimes, what the way it was explained to me is ceremony should be a place where no English is spoken. That is a challenge to people to come in and expect to say water, thank you, fire, prayer, tobacco, creator, uskapio, a helper, even if they stumble. So that'd be like the very last stand. And then there's today's young people learning the language. I would say just stay hungry. Always have a back pocket question in your pocket. Don't miss an opportunity. If you come across an elder in a Walmart and you realize that they speak the language, that should be your way of connecting. Hey, oh, you're from Fox Lake. Is it do you guys say this word in this way too? You know, I always do that. You know, the language is about connecting, and you should be ready to connect and having those back pocket questions and never waste an opportunity, because you might be that person, you know, that's going to share that word, and maybe just that little spark of fire that's going to create a whole different thing. Like, I didn't know the word for great grandparents is the same as in Cree, Nitago until today. And the one I tied together, the link. So every single person, every single young person, don't count yourself short. You can do a lot of amazing things by coordinating, facilitating. You understand technology and the way it works. You know, it'd be different if I didn't know anything about technology and I'm looking like this, I'm talking over here, and maybe I have the camera like this, I'm trying to use it like a phone. You know, that doesn't work for our young people. Young people have such an awareness, and I think you absolutely are a link to a lot of people that still have that gift of language. So don't count yourself short. Do whatever you can to pass the language, and always be ready to connect.
Kinanas komenten. Kinanas